Welcome to Paskvan Podcasts. Please like, subscribe, and comment. It really helps this channel. Imagine, if you will, a ship. Not one of glory, not really one of triumph either, but a vessel that just seemed to stumble from one disaster to the next, like a floating symbol of chaos and fear and just utter confusion. It's almost like it carried this aura of misfortune, you know? A shadow stretching across the waves wherever it went. Almost like it was predestined for calamity.
Yeah, fated.
Exactly. We're going to uncover the chilling story of one such vessel today. A ship whose very name became, well, synonymous with blunder and just plain bad luck. A cautionary tale, really, whispered among sailors and historians.
They're talking about the SS Kamchatka.
The SS Kamchatka, yeah. A Russian auxiliary cruiser, infamous during the Russo-Japanese War back in 1904 and 1905. So the big question is, was this ship truly cursed by fate? Or was its tragic destiny just the result of a desperate empire, terrible circumstances, and maybe profound human error, maybe even infectious human error?
It's a compelling question, isn't it? And what's really striking about the Kamchatka, I think, is how its story, even before its violent end, its rather inglorious end, became so deeply woven into, like, maritime folklore.
Right.
This wasn't just another ship in the fleet. It was seen as an omen, almost a tangible premonition of this broader catastrophe that was coming for the whole Russian Empire.
Wow.
It absolutely earned its reputation, a byword for blunder, a floating disaster. These labels, they just stuck to it like barnacles throughout its entire ill-fated journey. Its stories, this chilling foreshadowing of the wider tragedy that engulfed the fleet pretty much from the moment it set sail.
So our mission today is really to pull out the most compelling bits from the history, looking at just at the sources we have. We want to understand not just what happened, but why this particular ship got such a dark reputation, and maybe what its, well, turbulent and frankly perplexing life reveals about a world that was right on the brink of huge change, massive upheaval. We're going to try and piece together the events that really cemented its infamous status and ultimately led to its demise. We'll look at every twist, every turn of its extraordinary and, let's face it, undeniably tragic voyage.
The brewing storm and empire's desperation.
Okay, so to really get the tragedy of the Kamchatka, we first need to look back at the bigger picture, right? These colossal geopolitical forces at play, the Russo-Japanese War.
Right, the context is everything here.
Yeah, imagine the world kind of holding its breath. It's the dawn of the 20th century. You've got these two giants squaring off, an age where old empires are clashing with these rising modern powers, and global influences being, well, violently redrawn.
It was a time of huge tension and rapid technological change in warfare, too.
Absolutely. So on one side, you have Russia, this sprawling empire, huge ambitions, wants to expand its reach into Manchuria and Korea resource-rich areas.
But standing right in its way.
That's Japan.
Yeah, a rapidly modernizing island nation, but with its own burgeoning imperial designs on the very same region. Yeah. So this collision between these two, both full of ambition, both armed with new tech, it was pretty much inevitable, wasn't it?
It really was. And that inevitability played out with brutal swiftness. This was a war of modern industrial might, and it was a huge reality check for the old world Russian Empire.
How so?
Well, February 1904, no formal declaration, nothing. The Imperial Japanese Navy launches this devastating surprise attack on the Russian fleet anchored at Port Arthur.
Right, the sneak attack.
Exactly. And this wasn't just a minor skirmish. It was a clear message.
No.
The war was on, and Japan was a serious force, not to be underestimated.
Okay.
These initial strikes at Port Arthur, they basically crippled Russia's Pacific Fleet, left it badly wounded, almost incapacitated, and this crushing blow forced the Russian High Command into this desperate, almost unbelievable plan.
To send their entire Baltic Fleet, stationed thousands of miles away in the Baltic Sea, send it all the way around the world to the Pacific to take on the Japanese.
Wow, that sounds insane.
It was. And it really showed the contrast, you know.
Yeah.
Japan's Navy was meticulously trained, modernized often by British advisors, kitted out with state-of-the-art warships. Russia, on the other hand, was still relying on, well, sheer size and stubbornness, rather than cutting-edge tech or strategy or even adequate preparation.
So, okay, this colossal strategic decision.
Yeah.
What does it mean for our story, for the Kamchatka?
It means this almost unimaginable journey was about to start. Thousands upon thousands of miles, just fraught with every possible peril. A desperate last-ditch gamble by the Russian leadership to try and salvage this failing war effort.
It wasn't just sending a few ships then.
Oh no. This was mobilizing an entire battle fleet across the globe. A logistical feat of staggering proportions. unprecedented, really, in naval history. And the huge, unenviable task fell to Admiral Zinoviy Rozhestvensky. Right. He had to lead this incredibly audacious, incredibly dangerous deployment. From the Baltic, all the way around Africa, past the Cape of Good Hope, then across the massive empty Indian Ocean to finally reach the battle zone in the Pacific. The sheer scale, the ambition, the risks, it's hard to even wrap your head around it. Really shows how desperate the empire was.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that really gets to the heart of the challenge, doesn't it? It raises this crucial question. What kind of resources, what kind of ships would you even need for a task like that? And maybe more importantly, what kind of state was the Russian fleet actually in to even attempt it?
Right. Good
You're
point.
talking an 18,000-mile odyssey. It needs constant resupply, astronomical amounts of coal, a whole fleet of specialized support ships just to keep the warships running. It wasn't just a long trip. It was a logistical nightmare on an epic, almost crippling scale.
Pushing the limits of everything, basically.
Everything. Naval endurance, engineering, the morale of every single sailor, every ship, even the most unassuming little auxiliary had a critical role to play. Or at least that was the hope.
And here's where it gets really interesting and kind of deeply ironic, isn't it? The ship at the very center of our story, the Kamchatka. It wasn't some sleek, powerful battleship built for glory.
No, far from it.
It was basically a workhorse, a glorified supply vessel, right? An auxiliary cruiser that had been pretty hastily converted from a civilian passenger liner and just pressed into naval service.
And its civilian origins, its design, its whole purpose, they end up playing this huge, tragically ironic role in its fate.
Yeah, it wasn't fast, not well-armed, definitely not designed for the kind of brutal frontline combat it was eventually going to face.
The contrast is just stark, isn't it, between its intended mundane purpose and its eventual infamous reputation. I mean, yes, it was essential for logistics, carrying supplies, spare parts, tons of coal, even had workshops for repairs.
So vital stuff.
Absolutely vital. But the Kamchatka was just demonstrably not designed for the crucible of modern naval war. Her speed was terrible, armament minimal, just a few light guns. Her whole nature seemed completely ill-suited for the dangers of a modern conflict.
She was meant to be the quiet support hero.
Exactly. The unsung backbone, floating arsenal, repair shop. But the irony is almost painful, as one account puts it rather bluntly. She would never be remembered for her logistics. She would be remembered for disaster.
Wow. That really sets the stage, doesn't it? For the strain, often maddening story that would follow her throughout her short, infamous career.
A voyage of omen, the troubled beginning.
Okay, so picture the scene. The Grand Baltic Fleet, over 40 ships, getting ready to leave Libau in October 1904. But even before they leave the harbor, there's this palpable sense of dread hanging over the men, like a thick Baltic fog.
Not exactly a heroic send-off.
Not at all. Spirits were incredibly low, this pervasive feeling of foreboding. A lot of the sailors were poorly trained conscripts, totally green, unprepared for a global voyage, let alone modern warfare. The ships themselves were overloaded, dangerously so, with extra coal, supplies, equipment. Decks were cluttered, passages blocked, even some guns couldn't be used properly.
A recipe for problems right there.
You could feel the tension. Officers were already on edge, fueled by these constant rumors of Japanese torpedo boats, maybe even saboteurs, lurking around Europe. It was a fleet weighed down, not just physically, but psychologically, right from the very start.
And if you connect that to the bigger picture, these weaknesses, poor training, low morale, the sheer strain of overloaded ships, they weren't just isolated issues. It was a dangerous cocktail brewing before they even left port.
Yeah.
The fleet was literally carrying its own problems along with its coal.
And right from the beginning, the Kamchatka sort of lumbering among the warships, she's singled out as an immediate liability.
How so?
Well, her engines were notoriously unreliable, prone to breaking down. Her crew, inexperienced, lacking discipline, not properly trained. And her captain, history barely remembers his name, known for being nervous, indecisive, just not the guy you want in charge under pressure.
Not ideal.
Not ideal at all. Sailors on other ships started whispering, darkly that the ship was cursed, destined to bring bad luck, calamity to the whole fleet. And you know what? Those dark feelings, they weren't wrong. Horrifyingly, they weren't wrong. The omens were already there, plain as day.
So from the very first days at sea, the Kamchatka starts living up to this reputation.
Oh, yeah. Not with competence, but with this almost comical yet deeply worrying level of just utter confusion. It was like the ship itself was already lost, couldn't keep formation, struggled to keep pace, kept misreading vital signals.
Which is critical for a fleet that size.
Absolutely. And she kept sending out these garbled, basically indecipherable wireless messages that just added to the frustration. It wasn't a minor thing. It was a huge disruption, killing morale.
Any civic incidents early on?
Oh, yeah. One really infamous one, they're barely out of port. She sends this frantic, terrifying call for help, claims she's under attack by enemy ships, starts firing her guns wildly into the night.
Seriously?
Yeah, the whole fleet responds, braces for battle, only for her captain to later sheepishly admit he'd seen nothing more than ordinary merchant ships on the horizon. Their lights just looked weird, apparently.
Oh, boy. That raises a big question, doesn't it? How does one single ship become this huge source of anxiety, even dread, for an entire massive fleet?
Good question.
The Kamchatka's wireless, right? Yeah. Meant for vital communication, coordination. Instead, it becomes this, malevolent harbinger of dread. Every time it crackled to life, it wasn't useful intel. It was more false alarms, more confusion, more wasted effort, more precious ammo fired at phantoms.
So the other officers started hating her signals.
They began to openly dread the sound of it. Quickly realized she was less of an asset and more. Well, they bitterly called her a distraction, a floating blunder, a ship that couldn't afford mistakes, yet seemed incapable of not making them. Her unreliability, both mechanical and in her reporting, just destroyed any confidence in her. She became a pariah fast.
And this wasn't happening in secret, right? The world was watching.
Not at all. The whole world watched their progress. The air was thick with rumor, suspicion, international tension. Britain, for instance, was allied with Japan, the Anglo-Japanese alliance of 1902.
What did that mean exactly?
It was a military pact. Basically, if either nation got attacked by two or more powers, the other would jump in. So Russia's actions, especially in European waters, were under intense scrutiny. Any serious mistake could potentially trigger Britain entering the war.
A huge risk.
Massive. And whispers spread through the fleet. Japanese agents in European ports sabotaged plots. It created this intense, pervasive paranoia among the already stressed sailors. Every shadow, every fishing boat, every light became a potential threat. The line between reality and fear just vanished.
It's this perfect storm of external pressure and internal weakness.
Exactly. It created this fertile ground, almost a petri dish, for mass hysteria.
Sure.
Admiral Rozesfinsky, under enormous pressure himself, inadvertently drove his men into this state of hypervigilance, acute paranoia.
Oh.
Lookouts were repeatedly explicitly told to expect Japanese torpedo boats anywhere, even in the North Sea, which is just strategically absurd miles from Japan. And the Kamchatka, with its, quote, jittery captain and jumpy crew, became the physical embodiment of that paranoia. Always on edge, firing at imaginary enemies, seeing threats that weren't there. This collective anxiety, this self-feeding fear. It tragically set the stage for a truly catastrophic mistake. A mistake that would soon shock the world.
The North Sea nightmare, the Dogger Bank disaster.
Okay, so the stage was absolutely set for disaster, a nightmare just waiting to happen. Picture this. Cold, dark night on the North Sea, October 21st, 1904. Thick tension, smell of coal smoke.
Mm-hmm.
The Russian fleet, this huge armada, steaming cautiously, thousands of men on edge, constantly expecting this ambush from Japanese torpedo boats.
Mm-hmm.
An ambush they were convinced could happen right there, halfway across the globe from Japan.
Which, again, is just wild thinking, but that was the state of mind.
Exactly. And then out on the Dogger Bank, you've got hundreds of British fishing trawlers, their lanterns just bobbing gently like little fireflies in the blackness, just fishing, doing their peaceful work.
Completely oblivious. Generations had fished those waters. They couldn't possibly imagine the horror about to descend on them, mistaking their quiet work for an act of war.
It's just a profound, almost unbearable irony, isn't it?
It really is. And it makes you ask, how could such a catastrophic misidentification leading to such tragedy even happen? It speaks volumes about this profound breakdown in judgment, this institutionalized paranoia, this atmosphere of fear that had completely taken over the Russian fleet, fueled by the mission's pressure and, let's be honest, Kamchatka's constant unsettling false alarms.
Innocent fishermen just trying to make a living, about to be caught in this storm of steel and terror, collateral damage in a war thousands of miles away.
Tragic.
And then the spark. Lookouts on the Kamchatka, nerves frayed, minds primed for attack. They spot those twinkling lights off to starboard.
Lights that any calm sailor would recognize.
Right. But to the Kamchatka's crew, convinced they were surrounded, primed for an attack, those bobbing lights looked exactly like Japanese torpedo boats closing in. In an instant, the ship's wireless crackles. That frantic, chilling signal, the fleet is under attack, alarm bells scream across the decks, the die is cast.
And the chain reaction. It's a chilling example of how confirmation bias, amplified by fear from the top, can lead to mass hallucination. That initial false alarm from the Kamchatka, born of pure panic and paranoia, was enough. It unleashed a torrent of steel onto those innocent boats.
How did it escalate so fast?
Gun crews scrambled, searchlights blazed across the water, stunning the fishermen. And then, without clear orders, without proper ID, the Russians just opened fire. Shells arsed through the night, smashing into the sea or, tragically, into the frail wooden hulls of the trawlers.
Oh my God.
Fishermen screaming, cutting nets, trying to flee, their small engines useless against warships. The sea lit up with fire, explosions, absolute chaos. The innocent became targets.
And the Kamchatka.
Yeah.
Is she leading this?
She was among the very worst offenders, central, reckless. Her captain was later accused of imagining enemies everywhere, firing wildly, indiscriminately at any light, any shadow, kept signaling frantically he was being surrounded by torpedo boats. None were there.
He even claimed he sank some.
He did. Claimed, with alarming conviction, to have sunk multiple Japanese torpedo boats that simply didn't exist. The only victims of her reckless firing were British fishermen caught completely off guard.
Just terrifying.
And connecting this to the fleet's overall state, this wasn't just a military blunder. It was a horrifying human tragedy that sent shockwaves across Europe. The panic was contagious, spread like wildfire.
Other ships joined in.
Oh, yeah. Convinced they were under attack, they started firing, too, at anything. In the confusion, some Russian warships even fired on each other. Searchlights sweeping friendly decks, bullets whistling past. For minutes, that felt like forever. The fleet just descended into near madness, firing blindly, wasting ammo.
And the fishermen.
Nowhere to run, caught helpless. When the guns finally stopped, the cost was stark. 2 British fishermen dead, several badly wounded, trawlers half sunk, decks bloody, a testament to a fleet's terrifying failure of judgment.
The Dogger Bank incident, it must have caused a massive international crisis.
Oh, absolutely. Shockwaves across Europe. Britain was furious. Newspapers screamed for revenge, called it an unprovoked massacre. Diplomats scrambled frantically to stop it escalating into a full-blown war between Britain and Russia.
Because of the Anglo-Japanese alliance.
Exactly. Many feared Dogger Bank would drag Britain into the war on Japan's side. The thought of the Royal Navy, the world's biggest navy, joining against Russia, terrifying for the Russians.
Did it get close to war?
Very close. Furious crowds in London demanded the Russian fleet be stopped. The Royal Navy even mobilized its Channel Fleet, shadowed the Russians menacingly as they sailed south. For a tense moment, it really looked like Britain and Russia might go to war over fishermen from Hull. Just horrifyingly absurd. And amidst all this uproar, the Kamchatka's specific role drew intense condemnation, didn't it? How badly did her actions tarnish the whole empire's reputation?
Massively. Reports from inside the Russian fleet itself suggest that her captain was the most reckless, firing at shadows, claiming phantom victories.
Yeah.
Signaling wildly all night, convinced enemies swarmed them.
So she became the symbol of it all.
Pretty much. A potent symbol of Russian incompetence and paranoia. Her name quickly became this byword for chaos and blunder globally. Newspapers mocked her, called her a floating disaster.
And the consequences?
The Russian government had to issue a humiliating apology. An international commission later ruled against them, awarded compensation to the fishermen's families. But the damage to Russia's reputation was immense. The Baltic Fleet became a laughingstock, a diplomatic pariah, even before they faced the Japanese.
Wow. And morale within the fleet must have plummeted.
Collapsed into this deep abyss of despair. They had fired on innocents, nearly started a war with Britain, humiliated themselves globally. Sailors muttered darkly about bad omens, curses. Officers whispered about the Kamchatka, the ship that brought nothing but trouble.
Even Rozesvinsky must have been furious.
Oh, profoundly. His fleet still had thousands of miles to go around Africa, across the Indian Ocean. And already, thanks largely to the Kamchatka, they were infamous, synonymous with panic and blunder. Their epic journey was far from over, but the Kamchatka's reputation as a disaster ship, irrevocably sealed, a dark stain on their collective soul.
An odyssey of errors, the long journey continues.
So, despite the outrage, the humiliation, the near war, the Baltic Fleet just pressed on, left the diplomatic mess and the shattered trawlers behind them. Ahead lay this odyssey more than 18,000 miles.
Utterly unprecedented for a modern coal-powered fleet. It really speaks not to strategic brilliance, but to the desperate, almost suicidal nature of their mission. A terrifying gamble by an empire just unwilling to admit defeat.
And the human cost, the logistical nightmare, must have been staggering.
Oh, absolutely. What's remarkable is the sheer physical and psychological burden. No modern fleet had ever tried this kind of circumnavigation, dragging these huge coal-burning warships from the Baltic around the Cape of Good Hope across vast oceans to the Pacific.
Logistics alone.
Immense, constant refueling, often from colliers, coal supply ships stuffed to the brim, battleship decks piled high with black sacks of coal, blocking guns, blocking passages, crews constantly filthy, exhausted.
In the conditions.
Men choked on coal dust. It got everywhere. Uniforms, food, lungs, then the oppressive heat of the tropics, plus the heat from the boilers. Lower decks became unbearable furnaces. The fleet wasn't just battling the sea or the enemy, it was battling dwindling resources, the relentless grind of the coal age, and its own eroding spirit.
And through all this, the Kamchatka, still meant to be a supply and repair ship, right?
That was the idea, but instead she remained this relentless source of misery, a constant dragging liability. Her engines apparently broke down repeatedly, almost daily sometimes, forcing the whole fleet to slow down, this dead weight consuming precious time, precious coal they couldn't afford to waste.
It wasn't just mechanical failures, though.
Oh no. Her wireless operator kept sending garbled messages reporting phantom enemies, imagined attacks, wasting precious ammo, exhausting other ships with pointless maneuvers. She was, quite literally, this floating alarm bell that never stopped ringing, exhausting her crew, crushing the fleet's fragile morale with her constant cries of, "Wolf."
Any more specific false alarms after Dogger Bank?
Oh yes. If you track this back, the pattern is just disturbing. The most infamous probably came in the Atlantic, miles from any possible Japanese presence. Suddenly, she signals, utterly convinced she's under attack by Japanese torpedo boats.
In the middle of the Atlantic.
Exactly. Absurd. Yet her crew swore they saw enemy silhouettes. Other ships, still jumpy from Dogger Bank, rushed to help, braced for a night battle, only to find empty seas, fired wildly at shadows again.
Unbelievable.
Another time, way south of the equator, she claimed to have engaged a squadron of enemy cruisers, only to later admit, sheepishly, they were neutral merchant ships, mistook their lights. Each frantic signal spread waves of exasperation, anger, despair. Officers cursed her incompetence. Sailors muttered about doom, couldn't trust their own supply ship.
And the ship itself was physically falling apart, too.
Literally falling apart at the seams, yeah. Engines overheated constantly. Engineers feared a catastrophic breakdown any second. Boilers leaked, needing constant, dangerous repairs. Pumps failed regularly, a constant battle against flooding below decks.
Did she ever just...
One time, yeah. Lost power entirely. Drifted helplessly for hours in the middle of the ocean, a sitting duck. Other ships had to divert, come rescue her, wasting more coal, more time. Each breakdown, each failure, cost the fleet dearly. Time, coal, and what little morale was left. A ship that just refused to cooperate.
What must life have been like for her crew?
A special kind of hell. This raises a big question about leadership under that kind of extreme, prolonged pressure. Coal dust everywhere, coating everything, getting in lungs, eyes. Food spoiled fast in the heat, widespread food poisoning. Water rationing was severe. Breeding sickness like dysentery, scurvy.
Can rats?
Oh yeah, rats multiplied brazenly in the hold. Squalor, scuttling over sleeping men, eating rations. Men lived shoulder to shoulder, cramped, unventilated quarters. Tempers flared, nerves shredded by false alarms.
Oh, the cat could.
Grew increasingly paranoid, doubled watches needlessly, ordered pointless gun drills at all hours, wasting ammo on empty seas. Barked warnings of phantom enemies. His paranoia became infectious. Rumors of brawls, drunkenness, even near mutiny started swirling. Discipline just crumbled.
And she kept causing diplomatic problems, too.
Her paranoia didn't stop at shadows. Several times, she mistook neutral vessels for enemies and fired warning shots, risking new international incidents, adding more embarrassment to the fleet already infamous for Dogger Bank.
Like who?
One time, a Swedish steamer, crew terrified by this unprovoked aggression. Another time, she chased a German merchant ship, convinced it was an enemy in disguise. Let up only after lots of frantic signaling. Each time, diplomatic protests followed, stern complaints from neutral governments, deepening the embarrassment, fueling tensions Russia couldn't afford. It's just astonishing, isn't it, how one ship's incompetence could so profoundly affect the morale, the cohesion, the reputation of an entire fleet, militarily, diplomatically, psychologically.
The other officers must have been livid.
Furious. Each blunder risked another international incident the struggling empire couldn't handle. They were already infamous for Dogger Bank. The Kamchatka seemed determined to add more shame. Resentment became an open secret.
What do the other sailors call her?
They openly mocked her crew cowards, fools, called the ship the floating lunatic asylum. Officers quietly, then not so quietly, begged Rozhesvensky to detach her, send her home, rather than drag her towards what felt like inevitable disaster. She became a pariah, a tangible symbol of their collective misfortune, their systemic failures.
But Rozhesvensky kept her. Why?
He did. An almost impossible decision. Bound by rigid orders, desperate for any auxiliary support he could get, he just couldn't afford to abandon any vessel. They needed every supply ship, despite the headaches, the heartaches, the profound embarrassments the Kamchatka kept causing.
So she just limped on.
Limped on, hated, ridiculed. A ship cursed to stumble from one humiliation to the next. A dark, persistent foretelling of the even greater, more catastrophic fate waiting for the entire fleet. A fate she seemed to embody.
The inevitable confrontation Tsushima Strait.
Which brings us to that crucial question again. Was the Kamchatka's curse just a manifestation of these deeper systemic problems in the Russian Empire and its military? By the time they finally reached the Indian Ocean, battered and weary, her blunders really mirrored the decline of the whole fleet.
How so?
Men were utterly exhausted. Sickness spread like wildfire. Supplies ran dangerously thin. Officers quarreled openly. Discipline eroded. Sailors despaired. Morale shattered. Meanwhile, the Japanese Navy waited fresh, well-supplied, ready in their home waters.
But the fleet kept going.
Kept pressing onward, driven by this mission born of sheer desperation, an empire unwilling to admit weakness even as it crumbled. And within that doomed fleet, the Kamchatka remained this constant, grim reminder of their failures, a literal floating disaster foretelling the horrifying fate to come.
Did the sailors really believe she was cursed?
Many certainly did. The belief that she'd either sink before reaching Japan or, worse, bring ruin on them all in the final battle. It was a powerful, dark prophecy.
So after months at sea, breakdowns, false alarms, humiliations, they finally met their destiny.
They did. Morning of May 27th, 1905. Russian lookouts spot Japanese cruisers on the horizon. Waiting there, in the narrow Tsushima Strait, was Admiral Tsuja Heihachiru and the formidable Imperial Japanese Navy. Rested, supplied, determined to annihilate their weary, demoralized enemy.
The start of one of history's most decisive naval battles.
Absolutely. A clash that would change maritime warfare forever, shift global power, resonate through military history. The stage was set for a bloodbath.
And the Japanese were just better prepared.
What's really illuminating is the sheer disparity. Japanese ships were faster, more maneuverable, better armed, commanded with precision. They quickly exploited the Russian fleet's exhausted, disorganized state. They achieved the devastating tactic of crossing the T.
Explain that quickly.
Sure. Imagine the Russian fleet like the long vertical line of a T. They can only fire their front guns effectively. The Japanese steam across the top horizontally, able to unleash the full power of all their broadside guns. A decisive advantage.
Devastating.
Utterly. Shells screamed in, smashing Russian decks, tearing through those coal piles, igniting massive fires. The sea became an inferno shell, smoke, splintered wood, chaos. The Baltic Fleet, exhausted after 7 months, plagued by internal strife, fought bravely but disjointedly, signals confused, formations broken, easy targets.
And the Kamchatka, the cursed ship, found herself right in the middle of this.
Right in the thick of it. A ship never built for war, poorly armed, sluggish, thrust into the brutal maelstrom of modern naval battle. Her crew, despite everything, manned their few guns with desperate courage, firing wildly at targets in the haze, just like they had so many times before.
But this time, the enemies were real.
Terrifyingly real. And relentless. Japanese shells tore into her hull again and again. Fires erupted below deck, fueled by coal. The engine room flooded, steam lines ruptured, funnels collapsed. The chaos she'd falsely predicted, the doom she seemed to embody, it finally truly engulfed her. And considering her whole voyage, her final moments are just tragically fitting, aren't they? Almost inevitable. Accounts are fragmented, harrowing, glimpses from survivors of other ships.
What did they say?
Some claim she fought bravely, firing until silenced. Others said she descended into terminal confusion, captains signaling wildly, insisting phantom enemies still surrounded them, even as death closed in.
So even at the end?
Even at the end. What's certain is she was hit repeatedly by heavy shells. Flames rose from her decks, funnels collapsing. Men scrambled to fight fires, but the deluge of shells was too much for her flimsy build. Witnesses recalled a final, garbled wireless transmission, reportedly still insisting she was under attack by multiple cruisers, locked in her habit of exaggeration to the very end.
And then?
Then, abrupt, chilling silence. The SS Kamchatka slipped beneath the waves of the Tsushima Strait, taking most of her terrified crew with her. She lived as a symbol of confusion and disaster, and she died exactly the same way. Chaotic, desperate, overwhelmed, swallowed in absolute defeat.
And she wasn't alone in that fate, was she? The destruction of the Baltic Fleet was absolute.
An almost unimaginable catastrophe. Of the 38 Russian warships that entered the strait, a staggering 21 were sunk. 7 captured, 6 disarmed in neutral ports. Nearly 5,000 Russian sailors lost their lives.
Compared to Japanese loss.
Minimal. The Japanese lost just 3 smaller ships, fewer than 1,000 men. Testament to their superior planning, training, execution. This monumental defeat sealed Russia's crushing loss in the war. A profound humiliation for a vast empire and a seismic shift in global power. A new era of naval warfare began. And this really makes us consider that huge historical question. What did this massive defeat mean beyond the battlefield?
Right.
It was, unequivocally, the first time in modern history an Asian power had decisively, completely beaten a European empire. Not just a military win, a brutal wake-up call for the world. Showed the old imperial order, the assumption of European military supremacy was cracking, crumbling.
And then for Russia.
A profound symbolic end. A harbinger of the revolution, the internal unrest, the eventual collapse to come. The Kamchatka, in her inglorious end, became this enduring, if ignoble, part of that larger, tragic story of a proud empire humbled, broken on the waves of modern war.
The lingering shadow legacy of a cursed ship.
A few sailors from the Kamchatka actually survived, miraculously, plucked from the cold sea by Japanese ships. Their accounts painted this picture of desperate bravery amidst just unimaginable chaos, fires flooding, men leaping overboard as shells tore the ship apart.
But those stories couldn't erase her reputation.
No. For many in the fleet, and for those looking back, her end was just fitting. The inevitable conclusion to a miserable journey. No tale of heroism could really lift the dark shadow she cast over the whole voyage, a shadow she carried to her grave.
It's fascinating, isn't it? How the narrative for this ship was already written long before Tsushima. Her reputation as the disaster ship was sealed by countless blunders, breakdowns, those unnerving false alarms. Her demise at Tsushima was, for many, just the inevitable fulfillment of a long-predicted fate. The final, tragic chapter everyone felt they already knew.
A self-fulfilling prophecy of incompetence.
Pretty much. She stumbled into disaster, just like she stumbled through her entire journey.
And in the years after, her name became indelibly linked with incompetence, right? A byword for blunder.
Absolutely. In Russian naval folklore, in historical accounts of the war, sailors spoke her name with derision, maybe morbid fascination. Historians noted her outsized role in nearly starting a war with Britain, in exhausting the fleet, in embarrassing her comrades again and again. Remembered not for courage, but for chronic confusion, panic, this uncanny ability to bring misfortune. And if we connect that back to Dogger Bank specifically, it wasn't just about losing a battle or even innocent lives. It was the utter confusion, the infectious paranoia, the catastrophic lack of judgment that nearly dragged Britain into war over fishing trawlers. That incident remained her most infamous moment.
More than Tsushima.
In many ways, yes. It overshadowed even her fiery end. A chilling cautionary tale. A stark reminder of how one moment of unreasoning panic amplified by fear can have devastating far-reaching consequences, solidifying a ship's and an empire's negative reputation for generations.
So the Kamchatka story, it really mirrored the decline of Imperial Russia itself.
In so many profound ways, yes. A once confident, vast empire stumbling through mismanagement, internal paranoia, repeated, humiliating failures on the world stage. The war exposed its weaknesses for all to see. An empire firing on phantoms, ultimately collapsing under pressure, much like the bewildered ship at the heart of our story, a microcosm of a dying regime, which really raises this important universal question for all of us, doesn't it? What lessons can we draw from such a catastrophic voyage? The Kamchatka stands as this almost mythic, ghostly reminder, not just of one ship's fate, but of the profound dangers of poor leadership, unchecked fear, the slow erosion of confidence within any organization, any military, any nation.
Remembered for confusion, not valor.
Exactly.
Right.
A ship that fired on shadows, broke down constantly, brought shame wherever she sailed. Her story is this powerful, haunting, cautionary tale. Disasters don't always come from external enemies with powerful guns.
Yeah.
Often, maybe more tragically, they come from the fear, the paranoia, the mismanagement that brew and fester and finally explode from within.
The SS Kamchatka was, well, never destined for glory. Built as a liner, pressed into service, sent on a journey she wasn't designed for, embodying confusion and disaster right up to her very last chaotic moment. Her name isn't as famous as the great battleships, maybe, but in her failures, her blunders, she carved this unique, chilling, unforgettable place in history. A legend, a testament to the chaotic, desperate nature of that time, a monument to human folly.
And perhaps the most haunting part of her tale isn't just the bad luck or even the systemic failures. It's that powerful reminder that sometimes the greatest threats aren't external enemies at all. It's the fear, the mismanagement, the self-deception that brew inside us, inside our organizations, our nations. It leaves you wondering, doesn't it? How often do we, in our own lives, maybe metaphorically, fire on shadows, mistake the harmless for the hostile, create our own avoidable disasters just because we're primed by fear to see what isn't really there?
Thank you for joining us on this extraordinary exploration of a truly cursed voyage. We hope this journey into the depths of maritime history has left you with much to consider, and perhaps a new perspective on the unseen forces that can guide or tragically derail even the grandest of endeavors.